All
Welcome,
right.
everyone. This is the FinCom meeting. This is Tuesday, April 30th, 2024. This is the Finance Committee meeting, and we are joined with the Infrastructure Oversight Committee. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is 6:33 with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance
to the flag
to the flag
States of
of
America,
the United States of America and to the public for which it stands,
one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty.
and justice for all.
This meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law GLC 30A Section 20. And on March 29, 2023, Governor Haley signed a supplemental 2023 budget bill allowing remote and hybrid meeting options for public bodies through March 31st, 2025. This meeting is being recorded. I'd like to just announce the Finance Committee members that are present. Al Lees, Hugh Morton, Zach LeBrew, Christopher Thrasher, Cindy Brown, and myself. Make sure no one else came in. Steve, I'm going to take it to you so you can open up your infrastructure meeting.
I am calling the meeting to order. I see Bob Dale, who's vice chair, Maury May, secretary. I don't have everybody up. I believe Manny Saws is here. Joe, I saw Joe Amaral. Is
Yep.
Joe Rio here? Okay, so Joe Rio and Jerry Catino here.
No.
Okay,
I don't think.
and then non-voting we have Roger Fernandez and Jim Hartnett. Yeah.
Terrific. All right. Well, thank you. Just making sure nobody else came in. Okay. Great. All right. Well, the purpose of the meeting tonight, as we all know, the Infrastructure Committee has requested to meet with the Finance Committee. They're going to be making a motion on town floor, and they're asking the Finance Committee to review that motion and asking us to make a recommendation on that upcoming motion. So I will, and it's related to Articles 14, 15, and 16, which are the Route 6 water and sewer articles. So I will turn it over to the Infrastructure Committee because I think you have a presentation for us.
All right, very good. Maury, did you want to start it off or you want to go right to Bob?
No, Bob is going to be our primary presenter tonight.
Very good. Bob Dale, please.
But Roger, I think, has got the slides that you're going to put up.
Yeah, try to see if these come up.
Great. And I would just ask anybody that's on, if you could mute your mic if you're not speaking, so this way we don't have any background noise.
Karen and members of the Finance Committee, thank you for the opportunity. We do have 8 slides that we will run through. And Roger, if you could start the next slide.
Roger?
Roger? So we
Just give me 1 second here.
as you said, Karen, we do intend to move forward with positive motions on all of the articles and to ask in the money article that the present wording be modified from 35 million to 7 million, and I'll go through all of that. As you know, I hope you know, last Friday we opened bids on the 3 elements in the contract: the base bid and the 2 other sections. So these are the 3 sections of the road. So this is all on Route 6. This is sewer in the first section because there's already water, and in the second and third sections, it's both sewer and water. It is our proposal not to move forward with the 3 contracts, but to limit it to the first contract, which came in at the $5 million. So we had very good bids in this exchange. Roger? So this is our proposal we plan to bring to town meeting to bring a warrant article for $7 million that will cover the base bid, the actual bid we have in hand of roughly $5.2 million and about $1.8 million in all the other costs related to the construction. So this would be contingencies, covering change orders, contract administration, all of the inspection numbers, all of that stuff would be in that number, and that number is probably very conservative. This number also doesn't include the cash that we have on hand, nor does it include any consideration of the debt forgiveness. Westport is if we were to borrow this money under the state SRF funds, we are a tier 3 community, and we would be entitled to 3.3% debt forgiveness for sewer. And in that case, if we borrowed the $7 million, that's about $230,000 that would come off the top as well. Roger? So this is, as you know, and it has been discussed before, we are doing the allocation of costs in two ways. 20% would be covered by betterments, that is, the properties that are served by the sewer would be charged a betterment that is represented to 20% of our actual construction, our actual total cost. And the EDUs have been designed. This is these EDUs are an equivalent dwelling units. That is a house, no matter whether it's 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms, each home is assessed as one sewer unit. And we do that for equity reasons. If you have a multi-family unit or a 2-unit, or multifamily or a 2-unit development, then that's assessed 2 DUs, or the number of DUs that you have, dwelling units you would have. Undeveloped properties are developed based on the highest residential use, even though this is the business district here. We didn't try to make judgments about what business use could be placed in there. And so we said if it's undeveloped, it could be developed residentially, which is also the allowed use. For non-residential properties, that is, if you actually have a business here, then the EDUs are designed around the actual business use. And we calculated that on an FAR for what the business use would be used, all out of Title V, out of the regulations. And then dual use properties, if you had a residential property over a business, or a residential property and a business component, we looked at the assessment of those two and made a judgment of which is the higher. So if you look at the map, this is what each of the parcels that are served by the Phase 1 sewer would rank in their EDUs, so that you can see that most of the business properties are paying most of the cost. There are about 10 residential units in the first phase. There are 150 total equivalent dwelling units in the first phase. So if you look at White's, and it's got a restaurant, it has the seats and all of that capacity. White's was ranked as having the equivalent flow as 7 single-family homes. And then you can see the cluster of single-family homes that we have are all 1 each. And the various businesses all the way along the line are all ranked out of this betterment proposal. So the idea was always to keep the betterments or single-family homes under $10,000 a year or around $10,000 a year. And with the actual bids, that is now taking the $1 million that we have in the direct congressional spending and the bids that we have in hand, we took the $7 million, calculated the betterments for this property, and assuming that the actual borrowing cost would be around $6 million, the EDUs come out to 8,000. So this is something that I know you've been looking for, and we have calculated that it's Kleinfelder and the consultants have calculated this for all 3 sections so that we know what the equivalent EDUs are on every parcel that would be served by the sewer. And the betterments are charged only when the project is built and the sewer is operational at the property. Roger, we can go to the next slide.
Sure.
So we've also, in the recommended policy to the select board, that there is no mandatory requirement to connect. That is, we don't require that any property, even if the sewer was there, tie into the sewer system. It's there, it's available to them, and they do have to pay the betterment charge once the sewer is operational at their doorstep. The cost of actual connection varies all over the lot. And it's not a public cost. That is, it's not before the town meeting members. The sewer will be available at the property line. And then it's out from under Route 6. It's brought right to the street line. And the cost varies widely. There are some homes that sit 30 feet from the street line, and they would probably have reasonable costs. There are others that have long driveways and the homes are set back, and they would have larger costs. But again, that's not the actual physical connection cost is not on the warrant. Roger, the next slide. So this is sort of the summary of the funding and what it's likely to cost the people in this first phase. So as I've been talking, you know, we've got an article to borrow $7 million. We have at least $1 million in the direct congressional spending and the debt forgiveness, and there's some ARPA monies that are available. So we've just said, well, for this purposes in calculating what people might pay, we've said it's, again, the policy is 20% betterments, 80% townwide taxation. If you split the $6 million, that's, you know, the betterments are going to cost people 1.2 million, and general townwide costs are going to be 4.8 million. That EDUs, with 150 EDUs, that came out to be around $8,000 per EDU. The annual, if you paid it over 20 years, that would be an annual cost of $575. The townwide tax impact, I'm going to skip over the user fee because those are sort of connected. The townwide tax impact is that's roughly in the general tax rate. If you had an average, I think the average home price is around 596,000, and we rounded these up. That was $6,000. Your average impact on the tax bill would be $48 a year, and that would end up reflecting in a tax rate of about an 8-cent increase. Now, if you were then connected to the sewer system, you would then get user charges. That is, you're going to have to pay for the sewer usage. And we looked at an average single family using 180 gallons a day, and they would use, what the cost of the, to us of the sewer charges are. So the average user would use about would cost about $1,000 in the actual sewer bill that they would get. There's also a connection fee. That is, not only do you have to pay for the physical construction, but the town would assess a betterment charge. Both the user fees and the sewer connection fees would go into the enterprise fund to offset annual operating costs. So we have the effects of paying for the sewer is the betterments would be roughly around $8,000 per EDU, and the townwide cost would be about, for those people not sewered, would be about $48 a year, and that again is on having an end up borrowing cost of around $6 million. Next, Roger. These are the 14 articles. These are the 3 articles, and Article 14 is the money article. And I know, Karen, you were looking for the exact wording in the motions. They're now printed in the warrant, and they're very lengthy, but the essence of these are that we would amend the $35 million article to request $7 million, and that would also be done under a debt exclusion. The authorization for the sewer betterment assessments is to authorize the select board or the sewer commissioners to adopt a betterment policy at the 20%, 80% split in betterments. And there's language in that actual article about how the debt is paid and how the debt deferment options are, and that you can pay over time, or you have the option to pay at the entire assessment at the front end. And then the authorization for the sewer enterprise fund, it again is lengthier than what you see here and printed in the warrant, but it establishes a sewer enterprise. It would establish a sewer enterprise fund and have the select board act as the sewer commissioners. And it also sets up the procedure for forming a permanent sewer commission to manage the sewer system going forward. So this is the steps that would put in motion both funding the first phase and then setting up a sewer betterment assessment policy using a standard uniform method, and then allowing the sewer commission, the select board, to sit as sewer commissioners. This also requires a subsequent, for the debt exclusion, requires a subsequent voter ballot, and that would happen on July 24th. Roger, the next slide, please. So, as you know, the Infrastructure Oversight Committee is in favor of having a sewer system, not only this first phase, but to ultimately, and in the very long term, provide sewer and water services in Northwestport. So we do approach these articles with that mindset, but also with the understanding that this is the task that could be undertaken in multiple steps over multiple years, with pauses and with funds as they become available, and that we would seek to do what we did this year, to seek grants, to seek low interest loans. We would do everything we could over some period of many years to reduce the cost to the taxpayers. And I also want to say that, at least from our discussions, this is not a situation where there is an option to do nothing. That is, of course, the voters can delay acting. They can vote no, as they did in the debt exclusion article. But there really is not a do nothing option, because the Clean Water Act is still in force. The DEP, the Westport River are still listed impaired waters in the EPA list. The EPA and DEP still have an obligation and the town has an obligation to clean up the river. We just dodged having that obligation be brought to us now. It will be brought to us at some point in the future. The businesses and restaurants and people serving water and anything in the churches that have public water supplies are all faced with the PFAS regulations that have just kicked in with new low limits on last week. The two larger families of PFAS compounds were listed as hazardous substances. All of that will then lead to more regulation. So we can defer doing something, but I don't think the town in the long run has the options of doing nothing. All we can do is tackle the problem when it costs more and the betterments are larger. So for those reasons, we're strongly recommending that we proceed now with Articles 14, 15, and 16. And the first of those is we've got the bids in hand, and they've turned in very favorable compared to the engineers' estimates. And those engineers' estimates were based on what other folks have been experiencing. We came in $1.5 million below the engineer's estimate. It helps to support the businesses in Northwestport. And moving forward will create opportunities for new growth. We can't guarantee the new growth, but we can certainly guarantee if we don't do it, we're unlikely to get that new growth. And it avoids losing what we have in hand, which is the $7.5 million SRF loan commitment and the nearly $1 million direct congressional spending. It is clear if we do not do the sewer this year, the $7.5 million low interest loan commitment will go, if we don't use it, it will go back into the SRF fund and it will be gone for us. And if we eventually didn't do the sewer, the $959,000 is clearly marked for the sewer, and that would just go away. And it avoids jeopardizing future funding. If we were to proceed in future years with this next sewer and water section, if we turn down money that people are offering us now, it is unlikely they'd be willing to offer us money in the future if we weren't proceeding now. So for those reasons, and I know folks have their hands, and the committee and I will do everything we can to answer the questions, but these are, I think, the essential facts as we understand them of moving forward with the first phase. And Steve, however you'd like to handle the questions, just let me know and we'll try to answer them as best we can.
And we do
Karen,
have
do you-
a final slide where we do ask the Finance Committee for a revote on Articles 14, 15, 16 in light of our project changes, low bids, and our current funding opportunities. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. So there's a few questions. I just would like to just get a clarification, Bob, what you had just mentioned. In previous meetings, there's been a level of communication that there was an urgency that some of these funds would evaporate as near as town meeting comes and goes. Can you clarify the low interest loan, when that expires, if it's not used by a certain date? And I think there's some information on the Keating loan, the Keating grant, I'm sorry, how long the town has to use that, because I think there's some information that you can share with that.
Yes. So the SRF loan is a loan commitment for this coming fiscal year, which starts July 1. So it's on the fiscal 25 intended use plan. If we didn't use that money in the state fiscal year 25, that is until next June, it would go back into the SRF funds. Now, if we didn't move forward with, if we didn't move forward, my guess is we couldn't wait till June 30th to say, oh, now we're interested. That if we didn't use this, in the fall and make, they know that we have the bids, they know that we're going out to bid, they have the bid results. If we didn't move forward, we would be pressured. But if we didn't get the vote, we would be pressured to give, they would probably just take us right off the list. But we have to get it committed in this coming fiscal year.
Great, thank you.
The federal fiscal year, of course, kicks in October 1st. And our understanding is that if we move forward with the project, those funds are possibly good for as long as, that is, we get to use them over a 5-year period. So it's over the life of the construction project. But it's uncertain if the voters turned this down and there wasn't a plan whether or not it would stay a commitment. But it is a commitment for the next federal fiscal year, and we have time to spend that money.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it. I'm going to open it up. The Finance Committee has some questions. I'm going to start with Hugh. You've got your hand up, so go ahead.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. One is more clarification. I'm assuming that White's is already on the system, even though it shows as part of the betterment. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. The other one is more a matter of clarification for listeners. I think we all know this, but it isn't clear. And as first stated, what you want is an authorization to borrow up to the 7 million, whatever the figure is. You're not going to go borrow it and stick it in a bank and then pay it out as things go ahead, I assume. There'll be tranches, there will be taken down, short-term financing maybe, which then is taken out by the longer-term borrowing. I assume that's correct, but it'd be nice to clarify it.
That's exactly right. It is borrowing up to $7 million, and we obviously would not recommend the IOC is not borrowing anything. We would not recommend the Board of Selectmen borrow the $7 million that they.
Yeah, I thought that was clear, but also when we talk about borrowing 7 million, people may think that it comes in one slop, but it won't. The other thing is, in terms of the loan, low interest is better than high interest, but you still have to pay the principal. So it's still a big slug. But I assume that you're talking about commitments to use that rather than having to spend the full amount in the next fiscal year. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's if we made that commitment to spend that, it is to borrow that money. It is paid out over the contract period, over the construction period.
So you make the commitment within the fiscal year you're talking about, but doesn't mandate actual cash being paid out.
That's right. You make the commitment in this fiscal year, and we would borrow it as we need over the next 2-year construction period.
And that's what I think the focus we're talking about here is phase one, because that's what's before us and the voters are going to be dealing with. And the future projections are fine, but I think we all know that a scientific decision for this and that are sometimes based on the politics involved. So different administrations may have different rules in the future. The future will be the future. And what we're going to hold on tonight, as I understand it, is phase one, and I think that's where we are.
Hugh, that's directly right. All we're recommending to be brought before the voters is to take this first step and make the connection to the Fall River.
Yeah, but I thought I'm not sure it needs any clarification, but I thought it might be helpful. So thank you.
Thanks, Hugh. Al Lees, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, I do. How are you, everyone? I have a comment, I have a clarification, and I have one, maybe two questions. So I'll make it brief. One of the comments that I have, and it's not particularly about this project per se, but it's about the burden on the taxpayer for all of the capital needs that we have in this town. This, I know, is a passion for the Infrastructure Oversight Committee, but boy, oh boy, do we have a lot of other things on our plate. So I just want to make sure that we are mindful of the fact that we have many other capital needs within this town, and that this is not the 800-pound gorilla or the elephant in the room, or sucks all the oxygen out of the taxpayer. So that's my comment. Clarification. Pardon me. How long are these bids good for before they want to modify their pricing? Because we all know that inflation is killing all of us in a variety of ways. And how long did they commit to the figures that we're talking about?
We have the bid. The bidders are committed to their bid prices. I think 60 days, and we've got that through the town meeting vote. So they're committed through the town meeting vote, Al.
But not, and I'm not being argumentative. I'm just trying to clarify for us and for the viewing public, if you will. We have to go back to a town meeting on July 23rd, I believe the number is, and that's outside of the 60 days.
Yeah, we can get if they pass here, I think we can get the bid extension. Jim, you're on?
80 days.
We did do a bid addendum. I think Roger has the date, so it does get us to the July meeting. I think it brings us into August. Roger, do you have that date?
I do, and it's 80 days, and we talked about that, and it does get us through to the next town meeting. So we made sure that that date coincided with the next town meeting.
The ballot vote.
I'm sorry, the ballot vote. Apologies, the ballot vote. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
no, we've tried to cover them so we could get through that, but they're not good for a while.
They're not, no.
No, of course they're not. That's why I was asking, what their time frame, was when they put the numbers on. And the last question is, and then I'm sure I'll have some follow-ups later on. I was a little bit confused in some of your slides early on, because in one hand, we're talking about borrowing up to $7 million or have the ability to borrow up to $7 million to fund this, which candidly, it's going to take a while to get the bonds and everything else, set up, which will probably be, late November, December, whatever the time frame is. But yet, another slide or another conversation said that we were going to be putting in and reducing that amount by Keating's money to $6 million. So I'm kind of confused on why we're talking about borrowing $7 million when and I'm not necessarily, I'll tell you right up front, I don't think that Keating's money or the government's money should be put in. I think it should be $7 million, just like a mortgage. We take that $1 million when we get it and pay it down against the principal. But that's my thing. The fact is, the numbers don't quite jive by about $1 million. Could you explain that?
Sure. I understand the confusion, and let me see if I can explain it. The warrant article seeks to authorize the select board to borrow the $7 million. So that's what the vote is. Then we're trying to assess, well, what is the betterment cost? Because the betterment cost is essentially the cost at the end of the project, Al. So it's a cost when we know, we have a bid at $5.2 million.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're asking the select board to we're asking the voters to authorize the town meeting to authorize the select board to borrow up to $7 million. And they would, just as Hugh questioned and correctly questioned, we would borrow that over time. At the end, when we go to calculate what are the actual betterment charges, we take off all of we have the actual costs. If we didn't spend the contingency money, that we didn't borrow it. If we apply the debt forgiveness, the 3.3% debt forgiveness, that $200,000, we apply that. We have the direct congressional spending, we apply that. So all of that is deducted from the amount of money we actually borrow to pay back the actual borrowing amount, and then we calculate the betterments. So what we've done to sort of simplify, does that make sense? That the betterments are actually on the actual end up construction costs. And
Hearing you say, Bob, and
what we did in this example is we just discounted the 7, saying, well, we're authorized to borrow 7, we only borrowed 6. If that turned out to be the case, the betterments are 8,000.
all right. last question, then I'm gonna not sign off, but just keep my mouth shut. Are these are the EDUs, and obviously that relates to the betterment. Is this based on current zoning, or because the planning board pulled back their whatever, yeah,
It's all based on the current zoning, Al.
current zoning. So what happens if next year the future zoning adds 15 units, which I believe, and I could be wrong on this, per acre for let's say residential. Does that affect the betterment for the current project?
No, it wouldn't affect the betterments in the current project, because if the first phase moves forward this year, the betterments are set. All of that is done for the properties that are right on Route 6. If development occurred in that first section, but back off the street someplace, if someone put a new road in or anything like that, that's all subject to someone extending the sewer in there and new betterments based on those uses. But right now, the zoning changes are laid on the table, and they wouldn't affect what the betterment charges were next year.
It would not lower. In other words, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Bob, it would not eventually lower the betterment cost for the town and or the the people along Route 6 as we sit today. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's correct.
Okay, fair enough. I'll yield. Thank you. I'll be back.
Before we go to Cindy, Bob, can you just clarify so if there was a new construction of some sort and would they also be charged the same betterment, another 8,000 for that new EDU? I think Al was asking a recomputation, but would they also get charged would they also get charged a betterment?
No, if for instance, if there's a large undeveloped piece of land sitting in there, and if a road was put in there and the sewer was extended in there, and that became another project, once the sewer was extended in that area, a new betterment calculation, not on Route 6, but new betterment calculations would have to be created in there again on the same, if that were a public project, and again, the same 20-80 split. And if we extended the sewer and water down into the next section on Route 6, that again, the 20-80, if we adopt the warrant articles as they're posted, and we prepare a policy, if it's the same 20-80 split, then it would be 20% of whatever the construction costs are in the next piece of work that we do.
But what if there are, and I don't mean it as a new development. So what if somebody who is very close to Route 6 decided to connect in? Are they not getting a betterment?
No,
They would not be charged a betterment as part of this project, but that's something we would evaluate through the sewer commission at that point. And there would be additional fees to offset some of the costs at that point. That has not been determined.
So there is no policy yet to determine all these nuances, right, that will happen.
Yeah, and these nuances happen after the project is done, so those policies don't normally get established at this point.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Cindy.
So keeping along that same line of questioning, my initial questions were kind of what Al had asked about EDUs. And since we're talking about changing of EDU value, let's just say I'm going to pick a business on Route 6. There's another place called Westport Meats, okay, that's
Yep.
down across from the lanes, I think, the Holiday Lanes, somewhere in that area. So Westport Meats right now is one EDU. He sees that now that there's water and sewer available in that stretch, he's going to build a 4-unit apartment building, or even a 2-unit apartment building. He's going to build a large home that has 2 residences in it. Right now, he's only charged 1 EDU. Well, he's right on Route 6. He's in the current area. He has enough land to be able to create 2, but there's currently only 1 unit on there. He's going to create more. Will he get an additional betterment? I mean, I think these are some of the questions that people have about, and I understand you don't have all the answers, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot for this. Once again, I'm just trying to understand how either zoning changes or changes in the type of business that is currently on a lot, because this is going to give people a lot of ideas and positive ideas to perhaps change their line of business. How will that be assessed?
Can I give that a, I don't mean to jump line, Madam Chair, but I think I can help answer some of those questions.
Good.
So a lot of the nuanced questions that you have are prescribed already and available to us through the Department of Local Services. When
Okay.
properties are divided and the assessment's been assigned to that property, then that betterment then gets divided by the 2. So the question becomes, if it's that happens, or if it's a new larger project, where does the equity exist? So when the sewer commission is formed, one of its tasks is going to be to sort of put together a set of rules and regulations. And typically what communities do to sort of consider those things is they put other fees so that other folks are not taking, when I say other folks, other development are not taking advantage of, if you will, of the costs that folks already incurred. And so some of those fees would be, for example, inflow fees. So you can forecast how much flows going into the system by the new project, and then you assign a fee to that particular project. Let's say it's a big housing development or a development that is just off of the better properties, up the side road 500 feet, for example. Then you can come up with a structure that assigns fees to those particular projects, so they're not taking advantage of someone else's costs.
Okay. I just wanted to know if there's some vehicle by which you can go to have these issues addressed.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So I had a follow-up question. Now, you had mentioned about how you could have the sewer, but you can tap into sewer, but you have to have water in order to be able to tap into the sewer in order to measure, or will there be a separate way to measure just the sewer line? Suppose you've got a great well, but you want to tap into the sewer. Can you do one without the other? I know you can do water without sewer, but can you do sewer without water?
I think the answer is yes.
Okay.
And then the question comes, how do we send them a water bill? But
Right.
But yes,
Okay.
yes, you could, if you have a good sewer, a well, and you wanted to connect to the sewer, that's possible.
Okay. Last question. The enterprise fund, will there be a need to fund it with some seed money to get started? Since the betterments would not get assessed until you're up and running, is there some mechanism by which that fund needs any cash up front? Can any of the grants or loans be put in there to be used as operating capital, as working capital?
No, I think they're for the capital costs. Therefore, the total, the engineering, construction, all those costs. I don't think they go into operating funds.
So will you need money in the enterprise fund for working capital?
Yes.
Where's that gonna come from?
Jim?
So it's possible we could use some of the local ARPA money for seed money. We're also looking at a relatively new system, right? So the first 2 or 3 years, the equipment itself is under warranty. There shouldn't be any major expenses. There will be some expenses. You have 2 pump stations that have electricity that'll be on a monthly billing. They also need to be inspected and maintained throughout the year. They need to be reported on, I think, weekly because of the or monthly, depending on how much flow is going through. But there is a cost that needs to be done, and you won't realize some of that cost until after the some of that revenue until after the first year or
Right.
2. And
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Great. So I've got a question. So if there are
Hey,
Jim, did
Karen,
you
before
have
you
your hand up?
continue,
you
yeah,
wanna go?
Jim had his hand up, yeah.
Because it went down, so I thought he was all set, but go ahead,
when I
Jim.
speak, it goes down. So
I know, that's why I try to put my own hand in queue and I never can because every time I speak, it goes away. So I never get my questions in, but go ahead.
So I just wanted to get back on the borrowing, right? We're looking at authorization of up to $7 million. All right. And we believe that's conservative based on the bids that came in. So hopefully the overall cost will be 6 million, maybe 6.5 million if there's a lot of change orders, but hopefully we're not going to see that. But out of that, you're going to have $1 million of a grant that we're going to apply to that and another $1.2 million in betterment. So the actual borrowing for the town could be as low as 4 million, or it could be as high as 5 million, but you're in that range. We're not looking to borrow 7. And we also don't borrow the money until we need it, right? So we're looking at at least a 2-year construction project before this comes online. If we sign the contract in August, we only may spend $700,000 this construction season. So we're only going to borrow as we need it. And, you know, it's typical with all the projects we have done, schools, the fire station, the police station. That's it.
Thanks, Jim. So my question is, if more grants were to come in, so how would those be utilized? Would those be applied against this project, or what would we do with those? How would those be applied?
I guess it would depend on the grant, right? So I think they've applied for an additional grant that would go to the next section. And that's up to $5 million if they get that. We're still considering a MassWorks grant, but any grants that we could apply to this section, we would.
Yeah, Karen, as Jim just said, we've actually applied for direct congressional spending for fiscal year 26 for $5 million. And just, you know, we've already, the application deadline came and the town submitted that would be applied in the future. But if we were to get MassWorks grants or something of that nature this year, if some development entity stepped forward and we could get a MassWorks grant, if it was for the first phase, we'd apply it right to the first phase and drive down that borrowing cost as much as we can.
Mm-hmm. I know the calculation of the betterments is in large part for presentation purposes here, and so I appreciate that. Who ultimately would calculate the betterments? Is that the assessor's office? Is that the sewer commission? Who does that calculation?
The commissioners would end up doing the betterment calculation, and then and that would be in the reconciliation of, you know, the how much did we borrow on the final construction cost and everything. So that would fall to the sewer commissioners.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So just and again, this is not a negating issue for me, but in terms of how the betterments are being presented here in terms of taking the $1 million and applying it in part to the betterments is a little bit of a challenge that I have on how the calculation is working, but not so much that I need to waste an hour of our time discussing that here, because again, you're doing this for more presentation purposes, but
And Karen, just, we aren't trying to to fool people. At the end, it's not possible for us to calculate the exact betterment, but it's
Right.
it's going to be something in that $8,000 range.
Right. No, the question that I have really is how the grant is being applied to that. In my opinion, the $1 million grant should not go as a reduction to the betterment piece. The $1 million should be applied against the debt exclusion. In this way, the town-wide would get the benefit of that. The way the calculation is working, 20% of the grant is $200,000 would be applied against the betterments, and there's 150 betterments. So each property would get a credit of $1,333 of that grant. The rest of the town would share the $800,000, and then each property would get a $100 credit. That does not seem equitable to me in terms of how a grant would be structured. But again, not a deal breaker in regards, and you're just doing it for presentation purposes. And in either case, it doesn't wiggle the needle that much in terms of the taxpayer effect that you presented, which was the $48 for a $600,000 property. So that doesn't change that much. But it would change significantly if a $4 or $5 million grant came in. The concept would be very different.
Yes, no, I see that nuanced question, and we are looking to be equitable about this.
Thank you. Al, I think Hugh, you had your hand up and then down, and you want to go next, Hugh?
Sure. I just want to pick out a point that Al made earlier. I don't have the dates exactly in mind, but that is the accumulation of capital borrowing out there. But the first one, the oldest one, I think, is the fire station and then the police station. And my guess would be the fire station is down to 5 or 6 years, maybe by 2 or 3 by the time this was going forward. My point only is that this is a shorter project and a smaller amount. The burden would be less because there are things that have been financed that are not through the end yet, but getting to where you can see some light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you, Hugh. Go ahead, Al.
There, I found the button. One of the thing, and I'm fast forwarding, I think, to phase 2. A couple of the things. One that and don't take this wrong, Manny. One thing that disturbed me was at the end of one of your meetings when you asked the question to Jim, and I think Jim did exactly the right thing by saying that while it I'm underlining might be technically feasible to roll grants from here into a next phase, that isn't the taxpayer's intent. So I would be more comfortable to lock that up and say we have a discrete phase 1, and we all know where it goes from Fall River to, let's say, Meatworks, for example, and just call it quits and then go to the next phase. But the next phase of the whole thing is that if we get a grant for phase 2, then we're going to be asking the taxpayers to go on the hook for, let's say, $5 million, just to use a number, minus what is it? Help me with this. $16 million, I think, for phase 2, somewhere in that neighborhood. And it's like, it's like opening up a bag of potato chips. You start off and you just want 1 or 2, and the next thing you know, you've eaten the whole bag. And when all is said and done, and I go back to what Hugh just said and what I said earlier, I'm very, very, very concerned about capital need fatigue by people in the town with all the other capital needs that we need. So I think we need to, I'm not opposed to phase one. All right. I'll tell you right now, but I think we need to bottle up. I think we need to bottle up and take this as a discrete phase. I think we need to tighten up the, I'm a little bit disturbed, but about the fact that a developer a year from now can come in and put in 45 units behind Port Cestadage or whatever the name of the restaurant is, and not be hooked into, a betterment of 45 times 10.
Yep.
That does bother me, because I don't believe it's fair to the rest of the people on Route 6 or the taxpayers in the town. I don't know why the planning board, I know that Jim was on for a while. I don't know that he's still there, and what their thinking was about that. But it does seem unfair. And I'll leave it with this. When eventually we get to phase two, based on the cost, the grants or whatever it might be, and the number of EDUs that are in that area, they could be substantially above, or they could be substantially below, or right at, the dollar money of phase one. And how equitable is that for the people in phase two, or eventually in phase three? So I just wanted to toss that out as a concern for me.
Al, just I think we have come to we have come to see it as a very long-term picture, and providing sewer and water in Northwestport is a very long-term task, and I think it is made up of separate, distinct elements, and we make a decision about moving forward into the next when we know what the financial situation of the town is at that point.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks.
All set, Al?
Yes, I keep clicking the on and off mute button.
Yeah, I shared the same question that Al had in terms of really equitable and fairness to the property owners on Route 6 that are going to pay a betterment. And there might be somebody just off or in somebody's back parking lot that is right there that develops and then pays no betterment. I don't know how you address that, but that just doesn't seem fair. It's not something that I would base my recommendation on this article on, but just curious, how do you address those sort of things? That developers aren't getting an advantage over the taxpayers or other property owners.
I think that needs to get cured in the sewer policies as they get adopted.
Yeah.
Because there is no intent to have someone, sneak in just because they weren't right on Route 6.
Yeah. Do the sewer policies, once they get developed, do they get approved by town meeting? Is that a bylaw thing, or where does that sit?
Go ahead, Roger.
No, so once the sewer commission is fully empowered, then the sewer commission would create rules and regulations to address all these issues. And in most communities, and this is obviously available online, if you have a large development coming in, should that happen, the sewer commission is empowered to create a fee structure, typically referred to as inflows, that can really make that project, pay to connect into the system, even though they have not realized a betterment.
So my question was, though, is it a bylaw that goes through town meeting, or do the sewer commissioners have sole discretion of everything?
Sewer commission would have sole discretion. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Hugh, go ahead. You've got your hand up.
I'm just wondering if it might be time to It's people have been talking and a lot of analysis to make a decision, to have a vote.
Thanks, Hugh. I was going to ask if we have a couple of members here that have not spoken, and you're not required to. I don't know if anybody else had any questions.
Karen, you might want to see if anyone from the public, we have a few public members
Yep.
tonight. There might be someone from the public that
Yep,
would have,
trying to-
and
sure thing.
Zach
Nope,
has his hand up too.
Absolutely. We're trying to get through the finance committee first, but thank you. Go ahead, Zach. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was kind of just waiting here for the right time. I've got a couple of quick questions. Do we have an estimated project duration for this first phase?
Yeah, it'll be the better part of a couple of years to build this.
Okay. And can you tell me a little bit more about the connection fee? Realistically, what the all-in connection for these residents would be to actually tie into the sewer?
Well, there is the charge that the town makes to use the sewer system. So there's that connection fee, which goes into the enterprise fund. We're estimating that around $990. Then there's the property owner's cost to tie in. So these are the stub is brought to the street line right in front of your home, and it all depends, Zach, at that point, where the plumbing is in your house. Is your septic system in your front yard or in your backyard? So it's just the length of piping, and then also how far setback are you from the street? So in the older portions of the luckily in the north portion of the town, there are not these long driveways that we have throughout most of the town. So, but there are some properties that are set back further than others. So the cost varies probably from a few $1,000s worth of construction to, it could easily be north of $5,000 if you had a very long driveway and it was set way back from the street. So the cost vary directly proportional to that kind of distance that is to lay that small pipe to connect into the sewer.
Will any of these connections be, able to be done by gravity, or will an additional pump and macerator be required for these homes? Like, have we kind of looked into, how many people have to put in a pump and excavate and a line and a connection fee, or, just generally the lay of the land, does gravity work in most circumstances?
In most circumstances, the gravity would work, and the houses are close enough to get in by gravity. And even in the entire Route 6 has been designed, and we've tried to keep the sewer down so that most people could connect. There'll undoubtedly be some lots that pitch away from the street, Zach, and they may have to pump up, but the vast majority will be gravity connections directly into the sewer stub.
Okay. If you don't mind, I just have just a couple more.
Keep on going, Zach. Go ahead.
Okay. What would you estimate the percent completion of the construction plans are that these bids were, that this base bid was made on?
Oh, they're 100% complete.
They're 100% complete. And then I noticed that roughly, looking at your slide, it looks like the actual bids came in about 20% less than what the engineering team estimated. Do you have any idea why that there may be such a difference there?
Well, we had I don't know the exact answer to that, but it's interesting that we had essentially three bidders. We had six bidders. So we had competition. Two were very close. They were in the fives,
5-4, yeah.
right? And one was in the 6 for the first phase. I think I think and these are all, reputable, sewer utility construction companies. I think they see this as an opportunity to get into a community that may be expanding its water and sewer system, and to get in on the first piece of it and to start building relationships. Because most of what people are doing, these utility contractors, they're doing I&I work, they're doing replacement work. Most towns have already built their water and sewer systems. So this is a chance to get in. I think that's what's driving the competitive low bids, is that kind of attitude.
Okay. Who came up with the estimated 35% contingency?
That was the engineer's estimate. It's
The engineer's estimate.
it's very conservative.
Yep. No, and I just ask because I think, in the scenario that it's gravity, I think from a residential standpoint, yeah, you're looking at just a trench, the materials you're gonna have to core into your foundation or maybe your septic. But with a little bit of experience of tying in other circumstances, I'm curious what the cost difference is. Say if someone had to put in a macerator pump, had more than a 200-foot run, connection fee, annual fee. I'm kind of curious how that compares to if they were to complete a new septic that wouldn't come with an annual fee.
Oh, it's still it's cheaper to die. It's cheaper to, well, if they had to put in a new septic system, they're far more expensive than, a macerator pump and its chamber and tank. That package is $1,100. That's, you can't put the septic tank in the ground for $1,100.
So the pump would be $1,100,
Well, that's about what they cost installed.
and that would also require some electrical work as well.
I mean, that's in the installed price. So I think it's still, it is absolutely cheaper to tie. When I say absolutely, I think in the majority of the cases, it'll be much cheaper to tie to the sewer than to build a septic system.
Okay. Thank you.
Christopher, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. So I don't want to take up too much time here, but I just want to say again, I remain very much in favor of this project generally, and especially now that the dollar amounts have been curtailed somewhat, and to take a phased approach to this seems like not only the most prudent approach, but it seems like an opportunity for a huge win here. The one thing that I would like to leave everybody thinking about is something that was said very early in the presentation, and that is there are dollars that have been allocated through grants, the ability to have low interest financing, as well as the congressional outlays that have been already earmarked. And without movement on this project, it is likely that much of that funding will evaporate, and it'd be very hard to get again. So please consider that. I would ask the committee to continue to consider that when making their decisions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, go ahead.
Thanks, Karen. I apologize. I came late to the meeting, so if this was already stated, I apologize for that. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for everybody asking the very, analytical questions. I have just a couple of very simple questions. So if this was to go through with the 3 phases, and you said this one is about 2 years, how long do we estimate the other 2 phases? And when would you expect that the first residence or business could actually tie in to the line?
Well, if we built in 25 and 26, at the end of 26, somewhere along 26 or early 27, people could then tie into the sewer. So
That's great.
it would, as soon as the sewer is up and accepted by the town, people can use it. There's no delay.
Okay, and that's so that's about 3 years for all 3 phases, roughly, from now 24 to 27.
No, if we were to undertake each phase would undertake it at whatever its time frame, but they're all about fairly equal in length, so they're probably all that 2 or 3 years to do.
Okay. So 2 to 3. So even if we went on 2 years, so 2, 4, 6, it would be 6 years from, say, this year.
No.
No?
No,
2
it
years?
depends on when you.
No, I understand that. But if each one, let's just say we started now and it's 2 years, is the second phase 2 years after that? That's what I'm trying to understand. When would the second phase begin versus against the first? You know what I mean? But if phase 1 is 2 years, when does phase 2 begin?
It sounds to me like, Michelle, that it's 8 to 10 years for a complete build out. And that's cocktail napkin math, but
And I understand it's not, I get it. It's not.
I think it's,
That's also, as I say, we are talking now about phase 1, period.
Period, yes.
The
No,
others
I understand. I
come on
understand.
if and when they come on, and they'll be subject of new discussions and new financing, et cetera. So
I guess
now
I should have.
the only
I
one is
understand.
phase 1.
I understand. And I guess what I should have said was, if everything was 2 years, you vote, you get it in, so each one is 2 years. I understand you have to go through this whole process again, get the money. I totally get that. But but if everything went the way, let's say this one, it would be probably closer to 8, as you said, Al, 8 to 10 years before tie-in. That's and I know that's not set in stone. I totally understand that.
Maybe I can answer that question. So the contract had stipulated 3 years, 1,000, whatever that is, 72 days. And I think to Bob's point, obviously, as you know, Michelle, it depends on how you advance the project. So mobilization and continuous work shortens that window, right? You're there, you're on site, you have multiple locations where you could be working at one time. So, but in the contract itself, we've stipulated 3 years, which is an aggressive schedule.
Mhm.
But if we were to go through a process where we were doing this one phase, and then you had fund that, seek grants, seek town meeting, now you are talking a multi-year project. So it depends on how the project is advanced.
Mhm.
Hopefully that answers the question.
It does. And I understand there's no hard and fast answer right now. I totally understand that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I was just going to ask if there's anybody from the general public that's has any questions. If you do, you can raise your hand and then you'll be in queue. Michael Sullivan has his hand up, so he was already ready for me to even make that comment before I made it. So go ahead, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Mike Sullivan, chairing Webb Lane, but also representing the Westport River Watershed Alliance. I think that this downsized project is pretty respectful of your previous input and obviously the town vote. It's a manageable piece. It seems to be well financed. This group has worked a couple of years. The environmental impact is limited because of obviously the limited scope and the geography of where this is, but we think it's an excellent first start, and knowing the importance of your input to town meeting, and this is a 2/3 required vote to move forward, we would just hope that you'd look favorably upon the project and let it go to the next phase. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have any comments or questions? Okay, great. Okay. So, Hugh, you might be able to help along this line, right? So, we're being asked, so the warrant as printed is what the Finance Committee made its recommendations on. Now, there's going to be a motion that's made at town meeting that will read that language that we asked for, that you provided to us, so thank you. So we technically can't vote on a motion that hasn't happened yet, right? But we can, I think, vote subject to that exact motion being made. We'll be able to then make our recommendations at town meeting. We'd have to swap out our motion. Is that right, Hugh?
Yeah, I would repeat Steve has always said that the warrant articles is the question and the motion is the answer. And we don't have to guess what the motion is going to be. In fact, it has been printed in the warrant that we've seen, et cetera, so that we are anticipating it will be presented. Obviously, if there were a different motion presented, then a vote on a motion that disappeared would be irrelevant. So we would have a motion at this point, I think, to take a position on. I don't do either recommend in favor of or against the motion, which we presume will be presented at town meeting, which is the one we've been discussing tonight.
Great, thank you. So Hugh, could you make a motion to what we need to do?
Basically what I said a minute ago, I guess. I will move that we recommend in favor of the motion, the proposed motion, which would provide for the project phase 1 as specified by the material we have.
If that's a motion, I'll second it.
Great. So any discussion at all before we go to a vote? So I just want to make a quick discussion. So, and kind of talk about the reasons for my thinking. So the $35 million project that was questionable, many of the questions that and concerns that I had have been addressed. The zoning articles have been paused, and that's taken out of the equation. I look at the $7 million article as this is a standalone project. There may never be another article that town meeting would pass for the voters by the voters' choice. And as Al had mentioned, there's a lot of other capital needs. So I look at this project, it stands alone and it needs to have merit on its own if nothing else happens. And I believe this project absolutely has merit on its own. It has a lot of economic development opportunities, and it's a very first step towards the trunk line, which is needed. And so I think that it has absolute merit, and I am in support. So any other comments?
I would just say a little bit, Karen. Last time I sort of held my nose to vote in favor of it. And theory on some of your points here, I think this is much better within the scope of what we're talking about. I thought the whole project was several steps too far, but that doesn't mean that when the time comes and they are proposed in the future, facts may be different. But in any event, I think this is, at this stage, I'm all in favor.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Al.
Excuse me, I would echo Hugh with one exception, which really is not in the IOC's purview, and that is the pulling back the zoning. I still have an issue with, you know, with the betterment. The betterment is you know, a big deal for many members of the town. But I will say this, that to Hugh's point, this is a contained, discrete project that has a beginning and an end and funding and whatever. The other project was, I think I mentioned this at the last meeting, just a bridge too far. So, yeah, I will, I'll leave it at that. I do have some reservations, but they're not deal breakers.
Thank you. I appreciate both of, it's important, I think, for the finance committee, you know, we were not in favor of the 35 million is printed in the warrant. And whatever our vote is now, I think it's important so the general public understands we're not flip-flopping. This is really an entirely different project with complete different evaluation. And so, you know, we've heard the presentation today. So I think that's important for us to talk about. Any other comments before we make a roll call to a vote? Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to echo what you said a little bit. When we first looked at this and voted on it, it's very different than what we're looking at now. And I just have to commend everybody that's on this meeting and that had a hand in this work. I know these numbers and, you know, this whole scope is not easy to do. So I think there's been some people putting in a lot of work here to get this thing off the ground. So just some credit to the whole team.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I want to give a big shout out to Maury May. So he took a brunt of my questions and handled them very nicely and kept getting back to me and answering them. And I asked a lot of questions to Jim and little frustration going on for everybody, but you guys answered the questions and the questions weren't to be obstructionist. They were meant to be to get to the answer that we needed to get to, because I think the finance committee has been in support of the project, but just the 35 million project as presented, we weren't quite there yet. So I was doing everything that I could do to get the information so I could, when we do our roll call, make the recommendation that the town deserves with this project. So if we're ready to go to a roll call, I'll start with Al Lees.
Al Lees.
You got to say yes or no.
Voice.
We didn't hear that.
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Yes.
Just wanted to see.
You sly fox, you.
Hugh.
Hugh Morton, aye.
Thank you, Zach.
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Christopher.
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Thank you, Cindy.
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle.
Michelle Orlando, aye.
Karen Rouse, aye. That is a 7-0 with 2 people being absent. Look at that.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Thank you, everyone, for all your hard work. So,
Karen,
good
can
luck.
I need to have my meeting, my team vote when you're ready.
And before you go, so Jerry Catino did come on at 6:49, so we can
Yep.
add that to the minutes. And Michelle Orlando came on at 6:46. So, go ahead, Steve. You can adjourn your meeting.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll
So-
move to adjourn.
Whoa.
Bob Taylor.
Bob Dale made the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, Maury seconds. Roll call vote, please. Bob,
Aye.
Maury,
Aye.
Christopher Thatcher is on both committees. Chris Thatcher,
Aye.
Manny Saws,
Aye.
Jerry Catino, Jose Amaral, if you're here, Joe Amaral.
Aye.
All right, we have I don't think Jerry will get through. Did I miss anybody? All right, I call the Infrastructure Oversight Committee adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I think we're done here. We have the minutes to approve but I don't think I even read those minutes. So if there were too many other materials that have come forth.
Yeah,
in the
you've been
last
busy,
week, so
Karen.
I missed those. So we can catch up on those next time. So just as a reminder, town meeting is next week. We're going to meet at 6:30, but we probably don't have too much to discuss. And as a reminder, we're all encouraged as finance committee members to help answer questions to the general public. Feel free to get up to the mic to discuss and clarify anything. But if you're not comfortable, don't do it. But we're always recommended to do that. So.
Karen, I would just add for the new members that we generally meet in the school cafeteria at 6:30.
Perfect.
So people know where to find us.
Perfect. All right. If nothing else, I think there's a Bruins game going on.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Any second?
Second,
All right. I'll roll call Al,
Al Lees, aye.
Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Zach,
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle,
Michelle Orlando, aye.
and Karen Rouse. Aye. Good night, everyone. Thank you so
Night.
much.